Before we begin today's video, I'd just like to remind folks that I run a Twitch channel. I use my Twitch to stream games, quizzes, countdowns, Q&As, and much more. So please make sure to follow me on Twitch to be notified every time I go live. Howdy folks, Jamboriki here. The Flintstones is a Hanna-Barbera sitcom about the prehistoric suburban family the Flintstones, and their neighbours, the Rubbles. It's considered by many to be the first ever animated sitcom. In this video, I'm going to be digging up the two live-action adaptations of this classic show and re-examining their worth today. Let's begin with 1994's The Flintstones. Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble are hard-working Bronto crane operators on a quarry. One day though, they get a chance at a promotion when their boss Cliff gives every work an exam. Fred really wants this promotion because his mother-in-law keeps insisting that he's a loser. Barney, who is grateful to Fred for recently paying for the adoption of his son Bam Bam, decides to switch his test with Fred's. This leads to Fred winning the promotion, and he promises to change things from the top. Unfortunately, it turns out that Cliff and his assistant Sharon Stone are actually cooking up a business scheme that will put workers out of jobs, and Fred is going to be framed for their crime. Fred is oblivious to this trap though, and ends up letting his wealthy success go to his head, all while Barney is fired from his job for having the worst test results and has a hard time raising a family. I did revisit the Flintstones TV show before doing this video, and I can't say that it made me into a fan. I don't dislike it, but I admittedly don't understand other people's undying love for it. I can personally take or leave it. I respect its place in sitcom history, I just don't feel that enthusiastic about it compared to other classic Hanna-Barbera cartoons. As for the Flintstones live-action adaptation, well, everyone involved was clearly very passionate. Not only was director Brian Levant already a huge Flintstone superfan, but the crew worked their butts off to create a faithful bedrock film set. Every single prop and location had to be handmade out of thin air. Does it all look like a plasticky theme park, like critics said? Oh sure, totally. But a live-action bedrock was never going to end up looking realistic. And I didn't expect it to. To be honest, it was the costume work that bugged me more. Sure, they're authentic to the cartoon, but they're distractingly cheap looking too. I couldn't pay attention to the actors' faces sometimes, because I was frequently bothered by how all the costumes looked like they came from a Halloween store. However, you can really tell that the actors are having a lot of fun on set. Everyone seems overjoyed to be playing iconic cartoon characters, while hamming themselves up or mugging at the camera.
Wilma, I'm home!
I didn't exactly find any of the material that the actors had to work with funny though. None of the jokes are horrible, but I wouldn't call it a laugh riot. I've been told that the humor is supposed to be intentionally cheesy, yet the filmmakers have openly stated that they were trying to make a funny script.
What the script really needed was funny gags, true Flintstonian touches, and a comedy punch-up. So he said, well, what I do on Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley and all the great sitcoms that he'd worked on is what you do on a sitcom, which is you get the 12 funniest people you can in a room and they all start pitching out jokes.
Look, I get that comedy writing is really hard to do, but they hired the best of the best professionals to come up with the funniest jokes possible, yet we ended up with Tumbleweed? That's a yikes from me. I've seen far worse comedies than this, but the bare minimum I expect from a comedy film is to make me laugh more than once, and this film mainly got eye rolls out of me. Saying that though, the film does do a decent job fleshing out these sitcom characters into more believable people. A lot of this is thanks to the acting. All these performers bring some sincerity to their roles, expanding their animated counterparts with their own natural personalities.
Go get him, big guy. Hey, Brian.
Yeah, Fred?
Could you spot me a couple bucks for lunch? I'm a little short.
You're right, Fred.
I don't even mind the controversial casting of Rosie O'Donnell as Betty, because I never found cartoon Betty that interesting, and Rosie gives her a little edge.
Oh, now, Wilma, calm down. Maybe I can reason with him.
The iconic and glamorous Elizabeth Taylor, while underused in the film, is also perfectly snobby and aggravating as Fred's nagging mother-in-law, Pearl Slaghoople.
What's that old fossil doing here? The tar pit's back up again?
Well, somebody has to be here looking after my daughter and grandchild while you're out carousing with a bunch of Neanderthals.
Oh, really?
And when Kyle MacLachlan is his usual quirky self as the villain, giving the film's baddie a heap of obnoxious smugness with his trademark charisma.
Are you ready for your first executive action?
Ready and willing, whatever you need, consider it done.
Good. I want you to fire Bernard Rubble.
Done. What? Fire Barney? Why?
Well, for starters, he scored the lowest on the management aptitude tests.
It's just a shame that his character's villainy isn't captivating. The problem is that Cliff's whole villain scheme rests on getting a dim-witted lackey to mindlessly sign contracts every day. And that's it. He's been handed low-hanging fruit, and there's no tension to seeing Cliff or Sharon buttering up someone as gullible as Fred Flintstone.
I'm gonna read these over.
No. You're much too busy for that, Mr. Flintstone. Besides, reading is my job.
Sure, Fred raises questions, which makes Sharon nervous, but I never got the impression that Fred was quickly catching on to the crime scheme. You can totally tell that the film is really struggling to add some tangible tension to setting Fred up, with our villain's only strategies being flirt harder or bribe Fred more. Heck, it's all so easy that they often just wind down and fantasize over their eventual bounties. Cliff doesn't really become a serious threat until the finale, when Betty and Wilma work out what's happening, who then steal Fred's office dictator bird as evidence, and our villain finally has to outwit our heroes instead of waiting around.
Where are the kids?
The bird, please.
Here's the thing, rewatching this film as an adult, I did notice that the film is very outspoken when it comes to the corruption of capitalism, upper-class crime, and how these things affect lower classes, all through Fred's promotion experience. You see, Fred is now so wrapped up in his wealth that he no longer can value his best friend's generosity or his humble working-class roots, which isn't too different to Cliff, the main villain of the film, who doesn't respect Sharon as a person beyond her beauty, and looks down on his low-earning employees as beneath him. The more Fred is consumed by his lavish lifestyle, the more he begins to eerily resemble his own egocentric and crooked boss.
Wilma, who are you gonna believe? Me or some busboy?
That busboy is your best friend.
Best friend? Best friend? I lost my best friend the day I became an executive. He's just jealous of my hard-earned success.
Yes, Universal clearly only greenlit this film for easy IP profit, but the actual movie is very anti-capitalist.
I cannot endorse this modernization if it means laying off all those workers. Some of them have been here since the beginning of time.
What if I could quadruple your income?
I'll miss them. You were saying?
Critical of upper-class crime, and wants audiences to be charmed by its working-class characters. The film paints the underprivileged as a fun bunch of jolly locals, united together by their blue-collar camaraderie and love for humble activities like bowling.
Woogie woogie wee! Woogie woogie wee! Picky picky picky! Pokey pokey pokey!
Only becoming violent when the rich unfairly and unjustly take away their livelihoods. It's the film's affectionate portrayal of the poor that makes us understand why Fred ends up missing his co-workers once he's promoted to a boring and lonely desk job. Money is also depicted as a symbolic evil, specifically too much money, with Fred's ridiculous abundance of cash rotting away the modesty and earnesty of the working-class Flintstone family, all while the Rubbles struggle to get by, and a caveless Barney is exploited by a capitalist system in a series of degrading jobs.
Full serve, please.
Let's ride with the family down the street. Courtesy of Fred to Feed.
Luckily, it's Wilma that comes to her senses first, which leads to her making a dramatic statement by violently destroying all the material goods that poison the Flintstones and leaving Fred alone with his artificial happiness.
Once around the block, you'll realize the folly of your ways, and you'll come crawling back! Please.
So what about the puppetry? Well, the prehistoric animal appliances were produced by the Jim Henson Workshop, and the team did a cracking job. I especially love the Dictabird puppet. It has so much character.
Take a memo. Cliff, let's play golf. We can prioritize, conceptualize, and tenderize. Executively yours, Fred Flint!
Are there 6 or 7 eyes in Flea?
Who said that?
It was I, your Dictabird.
However, I will confess that there is something a little off about seeing these comedic punchlines in live action. In the animated series, it was easy to laugh off the cartoony animal cruelty, but this movie makes it all too real. There's something sad about it all that borders on almost nightmare fuel.
There's nothing wrong with this one. All right, you, say
While Dino is mainly done through computer animation, so he can be his usual playful self, some shots of him are done through puppetry. I actually think that it looks better as a puppet than in CGI, because computer animation in 1994, well, had a long way to go, let's just say. The puppet is just more tangible and believable compared to the dated 3D. To conclude, the OG Flintstones movie is certainly lacking in a lot of areas, but I have to respect the cast and crew's sincere affection to the Hanna-Barbera cartoon, and how the film works decently well as a fable of a grassroots average Joe being corrupted by his promotion, instead of using his new power to help and protect his fellow blue-collar workers. Sort of a warning lesson to working class audiences to not let their own good fortunes make them forget where they come from, and how finding success and power also gives you a responsibility to make positive change. While the bar is admittedly very, very low, I do have to say that this film, in spite of all of its faults, is one of the better cartoon to live action movie adaptations out there. So let's now move on to the next movie, The Flintstones in Viva Rock Vegas. Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble have just passed their exams to become quarry workers, but they wish they had someone to spend their lives with. Suddenly, a spaceship crash lands near them, and out pops the Great Gazoo. Gazoo has come to study human mating rituals, and encourages the two cavemen to find a date. Meanwhile, Wilma Slaghoople, daughter of a rich family, decides to run away from her stuck-up world and live a more free life. She befriends a waitress called Betty, who gets her a job at the fast food joint she's working at. When Fred and Barney turn up at the restaurant that night, they organise a double date. Fred with Betty, Wilma with Barney. However, the couples end up switching, and the different dynamic actually works. When Wilma invites her new friends to her mansion, Fred feels immediately out of place, wishing he could be rich enough to impress Wilma and her family. Wilma's ex, Chip, confesses to feeling guilty for belittling Wilma's working class friends, and offers them a free stay at his casino in Viva Rock Vegas. Unfortunately, it turns out that Chip plans to set up poor Fred in an elaborate scheme, so that he can get Wilma back and inherit her family's fortunes. This is often considered to be one of the worst sequels ever made, and while I do understand a lot of the criticism, I'm also willing to actually defend it on some counts. No, I'm not saying it's some kind of underrated or misunderstood gem. I totally get the flack it receives. While the first Flintstones never really made me laugh, I'd prefer Tumbleweed any day over the bad comedy in Viva Rock Vegas. The problem with this sequel's humour is that it relies very heavily on low-hanging fruit, and I mean low. If the joke is easy, the movie takes it.
What are you doing here?
I am here to observe your species' mating rituals. So, get to it!
Oh, Barney and me don't, Get up.
As soon as the film begins, we get an excuse for a ham-fisted fart joke.
Hey, I got 3 stomachs. Cut me some slack!
Then, cut to the finale, where Fred and Barney wear showgirl dresses, and that's it. That's the joke. Do you get what I mean? It's all so lazy.
One near the end looks like a man.
Yeah. Maybe your sister ought to try out.
Now, the introduction of Gazoo isn't a bad idea. He's a well-remembered part of the cartoon, plus the quirky and campy Alan Cumming is perfect casting. However, the film is so confused on how to use him best. Like, he's introduced as the dumb and naive one in a race of aliens.
As an intergalactic observer, you stink. Did anybody else see those big letters flying by?
But once he lands on Earth, the film changes its mind and suddenly he's a snarky and sophisticated character.
Now look here. I am not some sort of friendly cartoon genie, and that is not a bottle, it is a spacecraft. I am of a highly evolved alien species.
Half the time, I forgot that he was even in the film, because he's barely relevant to the main plot. He's only here to study and observe humans, rarely intervening unless he wants to tease our heroes.
I may not know much about your courting rituals, but I'll go out on a limb here and say this can't be going very well.
Sure, his magic space powers grant him the ability to uncover the villain's schemes, but it's clearly just a cheat code to push the story along faster, an excuse to skip over explaining how Fred and Barney catch on to Chip's intentions themselves.
Hey, I didn't know you could do that.
This is a mood discussion, gentlemen, because by Sunday evening I shall be married to Wilma Slaghoople and one of the greatest personal fortunes in the uncivilized...
Wilma's in trouble. We gotta get out of here.
But Gazoo isn't the only character who goes to waste. Barney has been reduced to a one-dimensional idiot. In the last film, Barney was an underestimated genius with a big heart, but Stephen Baldwin clearly only based his character on Barney's iconic dopey laugh, and took none of the endearing qualities of the original cartoon character or Rick Moranis' performance. Baldwin's Barney is just dumb without any of the charm, a himbo done wrong in other words.
You know, when they say all you can eat, they don't mean till you explode.
I'm just getting started.
Oh, and despite the film being very centered on romance, Betty and Barney's relationship is barely developed. It's background noise. The movie is far more invested in Wilma and Fred's dating origins, and neglects Barney and Betty's backstory so much that the chemistry is almost non-existent. The movie is so uncertain what to do with these two as a couple that it resorts to contriving a ridiculous misunderstanding, and Betty impulsively leaves Barney for a rock star, also played by Alan Cumming, while she cruelly leaves Barney in the dark about everything.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Betty is a horrible character in general in this film. Like, when she first meets Wilma, she mistakes Wilma for being poor, insists on giving her a home, and won't listen to Wilma correcting her.
Are you caveless? But you're so clean.
Oh, no, you see,
You
it's a
poor,
whole...
poor thing.
Then, when Betty learns that Wilma is rich, she gets childishly sulky, and the film pressures Wilma to apologize to her. Oh, and what about when Betty stole Wilma's date on a whim? Yeah, it all worked out in the end, but what kind of supposed friend does that? So I did say that I have it in me to raise defenses for this movie, yet I've mainly been dissecting its worst aspects. Well, okay, hear me out. First of all, I love the casting of Mark Addy as Fred and Kristen Johnston as Wilma. They're unlikely choices, but I'm glad that Universal took the risk. These two are very underrated character actors. Mark's American accent might be inconsistent, but he's terrific at playing the charming everyman.
I know I should be happy, but I guess I always figured by this point in my life I'd have somebody special to share my success with.
Kristen Johnston, who rose to fame with her hilarious performance in Third Rock from the Sun.
Oh my God! I'm gorgeous!
Is a wonderfully talented comedic actress.
We'll be just like our mothers.
The first film didn't really let its lead couple have a spark, because Wilma had been resigned to the role of a nagging housewife, Fred set no boundaries with his flirtatious secretary, and the two mainly argued like they always do in old sitcoms.
Who needs the Rubbles?
I do. But I'll tell you what I don't need. I don't need this necklace.
However, Viva Rock Vegas goes for more of a young love angle. And you know what? I really feel something between Mark and Kristen. There's a sparkle in their eyes when they look at each other. Sure, the writing isn't anything special, but these two brilliant actors are carrying all the weight to make up for it.
This isn't love. This is ecstasy.
Oh, and remember how critics complained that the first film's sets looked too much like a theme park? Well, I actually think that works to the advantage of this sequel, because it's mainly set in a Vegas casino. You expect a hyper-commercialized attraction like this to look like a theme park, so there's no need to suspend your disbelief.
Oh, this is heaven.
Hun, could you get between my shoulder blades? That's where I carry all my tension.
Fred's motive for money is a bit stronger this time round as well. In the first film, he just wanted a promotion so that he could win a petty argument with his annoying mother-in-law. And said fight doesn't really go anywhere in the film. But this sequel dives more into Fred's insecurity over being poor, and how he wants to live up to what he assumes Wilma expects of him.
Fred, it looks like you really lucked out.
No, Bon, this is terrible. I can't give her this measly ring. Look at her house. A girl like this is used to the best of everything.
There's more meat to his incentive to become rich at any cost this time, even if he does end up ignoring Wilma's rant defending her friends' livelihoods.
How can you treat people this way? Is it because they're not like you? You know what? That is why I like them, because they're not like you. They like me for who I am, not who I am.
I found the antagonist to be the best improvement of all though. Sure, our villain is no Kyle MacLachlan, but Thomas Gibson has a fun-to-hate presence and a face you just want to punch. Yes, Chip's villain scheme is pretty much a rehash of Cliff's, but there's way more development here. Like, he has a very personal grudge against Fred, because Fred is his romantic rival in his plans to inherit the Slag Hoople fortunes. He's not going after Fred because he's a randomly selected stranger, but due to a real conflict that Chip is taking personally. You can really tell that Chip is getting a lot of evil joy out of ruining his competition's life.
All right, Flintstone, you've lost Wilma. Now it's time to lose everything else.
Chip's scheme isn't some kind of mastermind plan, but there are steps to it that require the audience to follow along. We're not just watching a villain sit around while his lackey chisels stones. We get to watch a detailed setup play out bit by bit.
I didn't take these. Wilma, why would I take your pearls?
Do you deny that you owe the casino over 1 million clams with no way to pay it back?
On top of all of this, some rough gangsters are after money from Chip, so he can't mess things up or bail on this scheme. He has to make sure that he gets Wilma's money before a specific deadline. This adds some much needed tension to our villain's crime.
He wants all of his money by midnight Sunday, or he starts taking your casinos.
And breaking your legs.
Oh, and Pearl Slaghoople isn't just a flat mother-in-law trope that we see in every single family sitcom. She's been tweaked into a horribly abusive parent who neglects Wilma's feelings, pressures her to feel in line with classist tradition, and tries to control her decisions as an adult.
How did you find me?
I did what any concerned parent would do. Hired a detective.
You what?
We'll discuss everything on the way home. Come on.
No, I am home, Mother. And I'm happier than I have ever been in my life. And you could throw me in a sack and drag me home, but I'll just run away again.
Or while her senile husband, who she clearly resents, is the one Slaghoople who actually understands Wilma and is a beacon of light in a family full of shallow, vain narcissists.
I know you don't like showy things, but these were your great-great-grandmothers.
Oh.
In fact, they came right out of her shell. Oh, Wilma. Whatever you decide to do, I want you to know something. Your daddy will always love you.
So does this film even work as a prequel? Well, character-wise, no, not really. It only very loosely stays true to the first film's backstory for Wilma and Fred.
I'll never forget the first time I met her. She was working at a restaurant, and I won this all-you-can-eat contest, and she was the one to clean me off.
And there's no way that I can believe that these are the younger versions of the Flintstones in movie 1, because the film has its very own takes on who Fred, Barney, Betty and Wilma are, with the dramatic recasting changing everyone's personalities up big time. I especially failed to see how Stephen Baldwin became Rick Moranis one day. That being said, the movie does carry on the first film's theme of the upper class's treatment of the working class. That's still all here, however it's all been diluted down to a simplified rich people are bullies shtick.
Wilma's date works at the quarry. He's a photo crane operator.
Less of a satire on the unfairness of capitalism, and more Meet the Parents rom-com shenanigans, with some Vegas hijinks thrown in, so don't expect any biting commentary this time. What about the puppetry? Well, there's not much difference here if I'm honest. I have the same praises but also the same complaints. I do appreciate that the film even used puppets again, at a time when CGI was growing way more popular. Heck, Dino actually gets more screen time as a puppet than as a CGI effect, which is pretty cool. To conclude, I very much understand why so many people dislike this film. It's obnoxious, pandering and lazy, but I think it's unfair to pretend that it doesn't have its own positives, especially when it comes to fixing the flaws I found in the original film. It's bad, but I'm personally not fully on board the hate train. Okay, so those are all my thoughts and feelings on the live-action Flintstones films. What do you think of these movies? Let everyone know in the comments below, and feel free to subscribe, share, and like. I've been Jamboree, cheerio folks.